So we're looking in the book of Luke, and we're in chapter 13, and we're going to read a little bit about while he is entering Jerusalem. It says in verse 31 of chapter 13, it says, "On that day, some Pharisees came, saying to him, 'Get out and depart from here, because Herod wants to kill you.' And he said to them, 'Go tell that fox, behold, I cast out demons and perform cures today and tomorrow, and the third I will be perfected. Nevertheless, I must journey today and tomorrow, and then following, because it cannot be that a prophet should perish outside of Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen, her brood under wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate, and assuredly I say to you, you will not see me until when coming you will say, he is blessed who comes in the name of Yahweh.'" It is interesting because he's telling the Pharisees and all the people who live in Jerusalem at this time. He says they will not see him until when he's showing up and says, "He is blessed who comes in the name of Yahweh." Well, it says here that the word "you will not see me" means actually recognize me until you say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of Yahweh." So it is interesting to note that when we go to chapter 20 or 19, excuse me, rather, it's the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And in verse 34 on, it's talking about, and they said, Yahweh has need of him. So he's talking, the master has need of him, not Yahweh, excuse me. Talking about the donkey that he would be sitting on, the colt of a donkey. And he says, and they brought him to Jesus, and when they threw their clothes on the colt, they set Jesus on him. And as he went, spread their clothes on the road. Then as he was now drawing near the ascent of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to rejoice and praise God with loud voice from all the mighty works that he had seen, saying, "Bless the King who comes in the name of Yahweh, peace in heaven and glory in the highest." And some of the Pharisees called to him from the crowd, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." But he answered and said to them, I tell you that if these should keep silent, the stones would immediately cry out. And this is a direct fulfillment of chapter 13, where he was talking about, you will not recognize me until you say these exact words. And then all of a sudden now he's coming into Jerusalem, riding on the colt of a donkey, and these people are saying, "Blessed he who comes in the name of Yahweh." And he says, "You will not recognize me until you see this." That's when they say, some of the Pharisees called to him from the crowd, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." And that's when he told them what he told them. They had this understanding that the person who was going to be riding into Jerusalem on the colt, on a donkey, was going to proclaim himself the Messiah, or the King of Jerusalem. And so this is the thing that they feared. And we're going to go a little bit further. And he went into the temple and began to drive out those who bought and sold in it, and said to them, "It is written, my house is a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." And he goes on, and we're going to go keep looking and into chapter 21. And he's talking about all these wonderful things that were going to happen. He's talking about the poor widow who cast in just her little bit while everybody is casting in great big amounts. And he says that she was the one who was going to get the best. But she, out of her poverty, put all the livelihood that she had. And then some of them spoke in the temple about all the stones and the beautiful things that were there. And he says, "The days have come which stone will not be left upon another that will not be thrown down." And he's going through this all again, and he's telling his disciples these things because his disciples are the ones who are showing him these buildings. So he's answering his disciples. Well, I didn't ask him any questions, and I know you didn't. His disciples did, and so I'm assuming that when these answers are coming, these answers are being directed to the questions that were being asked to him. So if you go through chapter 21, you see all these you and them and you and you and you and your. Well, he's talking to his disciples and those who are believers at the time. And then he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. And when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies and know this is the destruction is near, that's a perfect example. That's exactly what he's talking about. He's talking about 68 AD when Jerusalem was surrounded by armies. But the day is interesting because the first group, the first person who came in to destroy Jerusalem and take it was not Titus. Well, what they said was you will see these signs and then you need to run. Well, what happened is he came in and he built a siege mound around it, and they were about ready to take it, and then all of a sudden they were called away. And at that exact time, that's when the Christians escaped. They left. That was the wonderful thing about it. They left. But those who did not believe, they stayed in. And then, boom, sudden destruction comes. And that's when Titus came and destroyed them. It was stated that he didn't want to destroy the temple because of its beauty and the wonderful things that he heard about it. But he went into the temple himself. He was a desecration. He desecrated it by stepping into it. It was desecrated anyway because they had burned it, and so he was watching it burn. He said there would be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. And it's interesting, we look at this particular verse, and it's talking about in Acts chapter, when Peter is explaining what's going on, and he's telling everybody that this is what Joel prophesied about. It's interesting because all of these things actually took place at that time. And then he's talking about be watchful and pray, because why would we be watchful and pray when we do not even have the temple this time? He's talking about the temple. It was going to be destroyed. It was going to be destroyed in 68 AD, exactly 40 years later after he died. And that's what I'm going to get into the next video, is why it had to be 40 years. Why it couldn't have been at that exact time or 1,000 years later or whatever. It had to be 40 years exactly. I'll get into that in just a moment.